Welcome to the HMO Property Show. By investors, for investors. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing. Whether you're a seasoned investor, a new landlord, or just curious about property investing, this is the podcast for you. Sponsored by the Co-Living Collective, your trusted partner in creating vibrant and sustainable shared living experiences. Visit us at colivingcollective.com.au to learn more.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, Neil Gibb, and today I wanted to bring you a podcast because the market is hot at the minute. And even in cold markets, the podcast that I'm going to share with you, or the things that I'm going to share with you in this podcast, can be really effective. But in this market specifically, because it's so hot, because there's not much stock on market, and because Joe and I are actually considering selling our principal place of residence because we want to buy a block of land and build. But there's specific terms that we want putting in the contract from the buyer to protect us as the seller, to give us the time that we need to find somewhere else for us to live, which is going to be a rental for a short period of time so that we can build alongside living in a rental. And what I've learned along the years of 10 years of investing in real estate now, and probably being involved in well over 200 real estate transactions, either for myself or for our clients as a buyer's agent, is the real estate is actually not to be considered in the transaction. And I say that in a way that the real estate is just the piece of, how can I word this? The real estate is the outcome, right? But the negotiation needs to be between the two people. And because the negotiation is between two people, there's a lot of different ways that you can craft an offer or make your offer on a piece of real estate. And I always remember thinking back to Mark Rolton, right? And I actually really like Mark. He's achieved a lot in his time. And what Mark used to always say was focus on the needs of the seller, and that would help you as the buyer craft the ultimate offer for them. Focus on what's important to them, right? And sometimes a high offer might not always be the best offer for somebody, because they might not have somewhere to live. They might not want to move for a certain amount of time. They might have certain things going on in their life that you're just not aware about, right? And it is hard to uncover these needs through a real estate agent. It is a lot easier to uncover these needs when you're dealing one-on-one with somebody, because you can have a conversation with them and ask them questions, and then you can start to negotiate on what would be a really good offer for them. So what I'm going to bring you today is 13 terms that you can put into your contract. And by the way, caveat here, I'm going to put this out, or disclaimer, I would run these past your settlement agent, lawyer, solicitor, whatever you want to call them, conveyancer, just to ensure that they are the right or the right terms for you. But this podcast is just to make you aware of what you could potentially put in them. And I'll also talk about how we've crafted them into different contracts that we've done over the years. And hopefully they will help somebody. So number one, the probably most powerful and probably the most, I don't know if it's the most used, but it's probably the most accepted term currently in this market in Perth, which is cash unconditional. And there's a lot of people from the East Coast coming in with cash unconditional offers, especially on blocks of land at the minute. Cash unconditional on an established property, especially an older property, can be risky because you don't know what's going on inside that property. And that leads us nicely into number two, which is subject to a building and pest inspection. But cash unconditional means that someone's going to pay cash for that land. There's no finance clause, there's no building and pest clause, there's no due diligence clause, there's no other clause or no other term in that contract that you have to meet or they have to meet. It's just cash. We go settle in 14, 21, 28 days, whatever that settlement period may be. And it's a very, very powerful offer at the minute. In fact, some people come in cash unconditional on deals, and that might be accepted over an offer that's higher, that's subject to finance and subject to something else and subject to something else, because it's just a quick, easy transaction. However, quick, easy transactions do not work for everybody. And in fact, we know that there's potentially a cash unconditional deal coming in on our property, but speed is not the thing that's going to win it for us. We need time. My wife's pregnant. She's about to have a baby soon. We want to find a rental that suits us. So we need time. So cash unconditional is not going to work if you're offering on our property, unfortunately. We really need time at the back end. So it's going to be, yes, we want the offer to be attractive, but we also want somebody that's not in a rush to move into that property. Hopefully 4, 5, 6 month delayed settlement, or potentially one of these terms that we're going to talk about today will be more effective for myself and Joe so that we can find somewhere else to live. So number one, cash unconditional just means they don't need to secure finance and know their conditions apply to the offer. Number two, subject to building and pest inspection. So once you get your offer accepted, first thing you should do, ring your building and pest inspector and get them into that property ASAP. They will negotiate with either the leasing agent or the sales agent to get access to that property through the owner. And they will go in there and they will do a detailed report and they will check everything. They'll be in the roof, they should be under the floors, they'll be checking the damp in the walls, they'll be checking the electricity, smoke alarms, etc. Looking for building defects or anything that could cost you money in the future. They will detail that in the report. What is a good way to craft this? And again, you need to get feedback from your conveyancer, solicitor, lawyer, whatever you want to call them, settlement agent, is if you are the buyer, then we would write in there, subject to building and pest inspection, satisfactory to the buyer's discretion. And that leaves it a little bit open, which means that if you're not happy with that building and pest inspection, then you can potentially pull out of that deal. Again, you need to discuss this with the legal team that are writing up your contract or reviewing your contract for you, because under the joint form of general conditions, if a building and pest inspection comes back with defects in it, you technically cannot pull out of that contract. You have to give the seller the option, you need to give the seller the option to fix up any of the defects that were raised, or the seller can cancel the contract, but you as the buyer can't pull out just because the building and pest inspection came back with a few defects in it. So there you go. Number three, subject to finance. This is a very, very common one. In fact, number two and number three are probably the most used terms in a contract that you're probably going to see. Cash unconditional is just becoming more popular at the minute because people over east seem to have very deep pockets, and when they're looking at properties in Western Australia, think that's cheap. I can pull the equity out of that property ready to go, and then I can just put a cash unconditional offer on that property because I've already drew the equity down from my property or other properties that I own in different parts of the country. So subject to finance, that means that if your finance does not get approved in a certain time frame, generally 28 days, sometimes in the HMO and NDIS space, we've got a 60-day finance clause in there because there's a commercial valuation that's need to be done in that time frame. They're a little bit more complex, they cost more money, it takes a bit more time to do them, and then the bank needs to review them contracts as well and get just a bit more complex. I've said complex far too many times in that sentence there. But with a standard, let's say you're buying a 4x2 in a normal suburb, the bank would send their panel, a valuer from their panel of valuers around to that property. It wouldn't cost you, the buyer, any money. And they do that really quick. Some of them will just do desktop vals, which means they will literally sit at the computer and just go, it's a 4x2 in Hammond Park, for instance. They generally sell for around $850,000. This one, judging by the photos online, looks very much to this one, judging by the photos online, and that one sold for $850,000. So I'm going to give it a ballpark figure of around $850,000. As I said earlier, the HMO and the NDIS world is a lot different. A commercial valuation is required. They're costing around $3,500 at the minute, and there's a 2 to 3 week lead time before the valuers can actually get through the property. So that's why we need a longer finance clause in there. Now again, the contract can be cancelled if finance cannot be met, and you generally, 9 times out of 10, need a letter from your broker or bank saying that finance could not be achieved for the contract to be cancelled. So they're your most common ones, number 2 and number 3. We're going to move into number 4, which is subject to due diligence, or DD. So this is a clause allowing the buyer time to investigate various aspects of the property. And you generally put DD in there if it's a development site or if it's a property that you want to convert to a HMO, for instance. We don't need to do them DD clauses for our conversions anymore because we just, without blowing my own trumpet, we are just good at them. So I can look at a floor plan now and within 5 or 10 minutes I can generally tell you if it's convertible and roughly what it's going to cost you. And then I can look at my property management team and say, what are these rooms going to rent out for? 20, 25 minutes later, we've done a full feasibility on that property and we haven't even left the office. But if you, as a starter in this space, or just trying to wrap your head around renovations, or just trying to wrap your head around anything else, you might want to try and put a due diligence clause into that contract. Again, due diligence subject to the buyer's discretion, and that gives you an option to cancel under the DD clause if you're not happy with some of the things that you pull up. The market is hot right now, and if you're trying to put an offer in subject to DD and it's not a development site and you're asking for too long DD, there's a good chance that you're probably not going to get that through, especially if it's a good site as well. If it's a good site, there's a good chance it's probably not going to be on the market because good sites just get snapped up because people have networks, right? So subject to DD. And in that DD period, if you get that contract signed, if you're the buyer and you want 30 days DD, you should start your DD from the minute you write that contract up, just in the chances that you do get that approved. You've already got a head start on that, right? And in that, you want to be checking the zoning. You want to be checking the title to see if there's any encumbrances or if there's anything on that title that you need to be aware of. Yeah. They're the type of things you want to be looking for in your DD. DD and building and pest are two different things. Like DD is, can I do what I need to do on this property? Sometimes under DD you might need to get a feature and contour survey, so you might get it under DD and you might need to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on that development site to then see if you can do what you need to do, right? So due diligence is a good one. It also allows you to pull out that contract. Number 5 is early access prior to settlement. We've used this a few times. So, by the way, so far, all of the terms that I've shared with you, we have used. Early access pre-settlement, we've also used this one as well. We've used this one to bring trades through properties. And again, in this market, you might not get the chance to actually do this because it's pretty hot and some people just want easy, stress-free sales. Some people might be like, oh, look, I know the offer is good, so you might offer a little bit more and you might ask for early access prior to settlement, so you'll get your finance approved, so it's gone unconditional, and then in that unconditional phase of settlement where you've got 21 or 28 days, you might get access to take your trade team through to get your quotes tightened up and firmed up from your trade team so you know what your renovation is going to cost you. Again, we don't need to do these anymore at the HMO Property Code because we do so many of them, and we've done so many of them over the years that we just know the costings. And because we're still doing a few renovations every month. We're not buying many properties, but people are bringing established properties to us and we're converting them at the minute. So we've got our finger on the pulse when it comes to pricing and stuff like that. So early access to get our team through isn't required anymore. However, sometimes you can ask for an extended settlement and get early access in there to actually start your renovation, conversion, whatever you want to do in there. What that does is, again, you get a head start. You haven't got any holding costs because you haven't actually settled on that property yet. And if you're good and you've got 28 days settlement and you've got a really good trade team, depending on the level of renovation or conversion or uplift that you're going to do on that property, you could potentially smash it out in the settlement period, and then day one after you own it, you could have it back on the market with the sales agent ready to sell as well. Them were the days. Oh, I remember that. The market was a little bit quieter. Agents were a bit more receptive and tradies were all over the place and pricing was good and sharp and feasibilities looked super duper. Right now, it's just super hard to get anybody to do anything, especially in a rush. We have got a really good renovation team. I'll give them that. Josh and Adam, you two are absolute legends if you're listening. If you are listening, Why are you listening? You should be at work, working hard now on renovations. Only joking, boys. I might actually get you two in on the podcast, actually, because I think it's important that, again, that people get to meet the people behind the team. And we'll talk about what's happening out there in the world of renovations as well. So I'll get them boys on the podcast for you. So early access is one of them things that you can get or you can negotiate on. Again, these are all just terms that you can negotiate on, team. Remember, it's a negotiation between two people. And keep some of these in your back pocket, right? So if you put an offer in for $500,000 and they come back to you and say, I want $525,000, you can say, okay, I'll give you $525,000, but I want early access after finance approval, and I want an extended settlement period. So they get what they want, but you also get what you want, right? Remember, it's a dance, and you just start the dance, and you go out there and you do what you need to do. Another one that's coming in at the minute, because a lot of people don't want to sell until they've got somewhere to move to. And this one is subject to sale. So I will give you 1.5 million, but it's subject to finance, subject to building and pest inspection, and subject to sale. So that means that they need to successfully sell their property before they can then get approval on your property. Now, if they've got the serviceability available, they can potentially get finance approval on your property before they sell their property. But they might also need to sell their property to get a signed contract from their agent to give to their bank to then get finance approval on yours. Sometimes this is called a chain or a link transaction, because obviously there's a knock-on effect, right? And I've spoken to some agents where they've had 5 or 6 of these lined up, subject to sale, subject to sale, subject to sale, subject to sale, subject to sale. It's like a little domino effect. And obviously in this market, if subject to sale, and if you're putting too many terms in a contract and then a cash unconditional comes in, then that person might look, I'll take your cash unconditional, but I want an extended settlement. Again, there's no hard and fast, it has to be this day, it has to be this. You can negotiate whatever works for you guys, right? And also whatever works for them as well. So we've just done subject to sale. Also, there's a clause that can be called first right of refusal. So the seller grants the buyer the right to opt to purchase an adjacent or related property if it becomes available for sale, giving the buyer first priority before the seller offers it to others. So for instance, somebody might sell a block of land to somebody, and then, am I going to butcher this? So basically, the seller owns an adjacent block of land and agrees to give the buyer the first option to purchase if they decide to sell in the future. And this will be more of, if the same seller owns 2 blocks of land and is only selling one of them, you might put in there and say, I want first right of refusal on your other block of land if you ever come to sell that in the future, right? So that's first right of refusal. Number 8. So we've never used first right of refusal. We've used subject to sale before. I've never used first right of refusal, which is probably why it didn't flow. I feel like it was a bit clunky coming out there, guys, so I apologise for that. Number 8, delayed settlement. We've definitely used these before. So again, standard settlement timeframes can be anywhere from 14 days to 28 days. We've had them pushed out to 60 days. We tried to get one for 90 days before, didn't work, but 60 days, yeah, delayed settlement, no problem. So there might just be things that you need to do in that time frame to get your affairs in order so that you can actually settle on that property. And they could be many, many things, right? It could be you need to find, the seller need to find a new property. And you can delay settlement by weeks, months. You know, if the other person's got the patience, you can delay it for a year, but I don't know if you as a buyer would want to delay it that long unless you've got early access, right? Number 9, this is something that we might look into ourselves for for our property. It's a rent back agreement. So we would sell the property to the new buyer, and then we would enter into a periodical rental agreement with that buyer so that we could still live in our own house, but we've got the cash in the bank to then purchase the next house that we want to purchase, because we might need to buy a house, an established house that's on a block of land big enough. We might need to knock that house down so that we can then build our family home. And the reason that we are moving, right, is because, yes, Joe's pregnant, the family's getting bigger. And yeah, that house just feels like it's getting smaller and smaller. It's a beautiful house. And we are sad to leave it, but we need to upgrade, unfortunately. So rent back agreement might be something that we do. We might say, right, or we'll settle in 28 days, but we need to rent the property from you for the next 3 months. But we can also cancel this periodic agreement at any time we want, but only from our end. You can't cancel it on us. Again, it's a negotiation. They might say no. We might not like what they come back with. It's just the dance. Rent back agreement, there you go. It's a pretty good one. You can also negotiate as well a rent-free period, so a seller rent-free period. So the seller is allowed to remain in the property after settlement without paying rent for a specified period, typically because they need more time to move out. Now, that could be us again, right? We could do the rent-back agreement, or we could do the rent-free period. Who knows? We might even try that one. I think we've done early access, haven't we? We've done early access. Have I got this in here? I've got early access in my list twice. So I do apologise, guys. I thought I had 13 terms for you. I've actually got 12 because I put one in there twice. So I was going to tell you early access again. Next one is deposit release clause. We've used this one. We used this one when we purchased the house that we live in now, because we did the market was up. We've only lived there for 2 years. If you've been following the Perth market, it's been pretty hot for the last 3 years. And Joe and I managed to secure a property where we put an offer on it. We rented the property for a certain period of time before we settled on it, because I had money tied up in other projects. And then we rented that property in that time period. But we actually said that we'd release the deposit to the seller so that they knew we were serious, that once the rental period finished, we'd then settle on the property, which we did. It worked well for them guys because they wanted to go to Melbourne, suss a few things out. Again, everything's in negotiation. The agent at the time was like, well, I've never actually written an offer like this before, so this has been a really good learning curve for me. And again, just find out what works for them. He actually said to us, I don't think they'll take that offer. And we were like, well, let's just put it forward to them there anyway. We'll put it in an email for you. You can take it to them. And yeah, they came back and said, they're interested. So there you go. We went ahead and 8 months later, we settled on that property. And then number 12, I've got 13. It's confusing me, guys, because I put the same one in twice, didn't I? But number 12 is settlement on notice. And again, we could use this one when selling the property that we live in now. Basically, the settlement date is not fixed, but will occur a certain number of days after specific conditions are met, such as the buyer securing finance or selling another property, or in our case, finding a rental property to move into. And that kind of comes back to the rent back agreement or the rent-free period, which would tie into the settlement on notice thing as well. So there you go. I'll quickly run through them again. Number 1 is cash unconditional. Number 2, subject to building and pest inspection. And the wording to put into there is, I can't remember the phrase. I'm fasting today, guys. I haven't had any food yet. It's 3:30. I'm absolutely starving. My brain's not working properly. Building and pest inspection, satisfactory to buyer's discretion. There we go. Got it out. Well done, Gibby, son. Number 3, subject to finance, pretty common clause. Number 4, subject to due diligence, satisfactory to buyer's discretion. Number 6, early access prior to settlement. Number 7, God, I'm messing this right up, aren't I? Number 5, early access prior to settlement. Number 6, subject to sale, also known as a link transaction or a chain transaction. Number 7, first right of refusal. Number 8, delayed settlement. Number 9, rent back agreement. Number 10, seller rent-free period. Number 11, deposit release clause. And number 12, settlement on notice. So there you go, guys. Again, stick them in your little bag of tricks, your little bag of negotiations. You can negotiate these through real estate agents. We have done it many times. You can also negotiate these direct with sellers if you can get in front of them. I feel like getting in front of a seller always works well because you can both work out what works best for you. sometimes with a real estate agent in the way they just want to get a nice easy transaction so that they can get paid, and I understand that and I appreciate that. I've worked on both sides of the transaction myself, but yeah, I always feel like you can I've crafted some really good deals working direct with vendors. Really good deals. I've done call options on renovations, I've done call options on subdivisions, I've done seller joint ventures, done vendor finance. There's not a lot of things that I haven't done in this space in the 10 years that I've been in here. I've had to be creative over the years. If you want to get to where you want to be, guys, you've got to hustle, you've got to be creative, you've got to take calculated risks, you've got to step outside the norm and just thinking that you can buy and hold properties and just get building pest inspection and subject to finance in your deals as well. When you get creative and you learn how to negotiate and you know where you want to go, and you start implementing some of these terms into your contracts so that you can get better terms that suit you but also suits them as well. Don't forget, you can make it sound like you're giving them a win, but really it's working so much better for you as well. And going back to Mark Rowland, he always says focus on the seller's needs and make it sound like you're crafting the deal for them. Well, if you want this, I can do this for you. It's not I want this. It's like, if you want this, I can do this for you. And it's amazing how much it works. And especially with things like call options, Mark always says time is more important than money. And if you're willing to give me time, I would be willing to give you more money. So there you go, guys. I might do one on negotiation tactics. What do you think? But for now, there's 12 good terms, good clauses you can potentially craft into your agreements in your contracts. I wouldn't go slamming them all in there at once. Remember, it's a dance. So would they be interested in this? Ooh, well, they've come back and said they could be interested in this. Okay, well, I could potentially do that, but what about it? I would need this. So if we can make that work, then looks like we've got a good outcome for both parties. So there you go, guys. Hope that helps. Join us again next time on the HMO Property Show. And remember, every master was once a disaster. Every winner was once a beginner.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you can stay up to date with all cash flow positive property updates.